let's cut to the chase. Should The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway be a single or double album?
I would say a single.
Yep, I'm in agreement. There we go. Job done. Quickest episode we've ever done. So thank you for listening and good night. I suppose we better discuss why we think that, right?
Yeah, I think we should. That would be good.
Okay, here's the theme tune.
What's that smell?
Oh, that would be me. I've been swimming in raw sewage. I love it. I love it! That's the signal. Let's go. Do it. Great.
Welcome to Trimming Musical Fat, the podcast where we trim albums that are too damn long. I'm Stephen Nicholson.
And I'm Paul Nicholson.
And thank you for joining us as we take our invisible scissors to Genesis's 1974 double album, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. What's going to make the under 50-minute single vinyl TTMF supercut of the album? Its title track, Carpet Crawlers, Lily White Lilith, Back in NYC. Keep listening to find out. We'll also find time to do regular features like Joke of the Pod, Tale of the Tape, Critical Reception, Trim the Talk, Archive interview clips, revisit the year of release, and take on the final questions.
This is Caroline.
And this is Marisa.
We're the Eves, and you're listening to Trimming the Musical Fat.
It was a strange period, actually. I mean, The Lamb kind of started for me. I can remember driving into Headley Grange. I had Andy, my first wife, with me, and I had Jolie with me. And it was this kind of, it was a bit like going into a Dickens novel, you know. It was like this, windows broken and rats everywhere. There were rats everywhere. Bad Company had used it, and Zeppelin had used it, and they'd recorded the When the Levee Breaks album there. But no one had cleaned up. It was really odd. I mean, this poor woman that owned the house, I don't think she knew what she was letting herself in for. But literally there were rats everywhere. So you'd walk in, and you'd be walking down the corridor, and 2 or 3 rats would walk past you. They wouldn't scurry away. They just walk past you and stop and look at you. Say, well, yeah, got a problem? You know. And then in the back garden, there was these vines, you know, up the back wall, and you'd see this constant scurry of activity. And I was bringing a daughter into this, you know, where we were going to stay the night. I mean, at night when you went to bed, you could hear the scurrying around it. I mean, the place never slept.
I remember talking to Robert Plant about this. They worked in the same place. Zepp had worked at Headley Grange, and he said, "You know, I'm convinced that place was haunted." I said, "Me too. I heard the sounds at night. I couldn't get off to sleep. That place was weird."
Okay, Paul, so we're talking Genesis today. What's your level of fandom when it comes to the band?
Before we start, I'd just like to show you the t-shirt.
Exclusive t-shirts. Brand new birthday t-shirt.
Yes.
Which comes across really well in a podcast, doesn't it?
Yeah.
For people not watching this. So let me describe it. So Paul is wearing a Trimming Musical Fat Elton John t-shirt for our upcoming Goodbye Yellow Brick Road episode, which is out tomorrow, in fact, the 14th of April 2023. So you just received that today?
Yes, yeah, received that.
Like it?
Thank you. Yeah, it was cool. It's cool.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Very
It
cool.
quite literally is one of a kind. It's the only one in the world.
Yeah.
If anybody
that's
wants
cool.
one, we'll make one for you and charge you £100. Bargain, collector's item. So anyway, we're talking Genesis. What's your level of fandom, Paul?
Probably more into the, not so much into a lot of the 70s albums, although I do have them. And I had the Platinum Edition, which came out maybe 2004. And that was when I got into a lot of the 70s stuff. And a lot of it's good, actually. So I'd say I'm kind of a mid fan. I'm not a massive fan, but I probably prefer their 80s stuff. It's just more commercial, more accessible, really. But good band, very underrated band who get unfair criticism, I think.
Yeah. Do you remember what was the first Genesis record, cassette, or CD you ever bought?
First one I bought would probably be We Can't Dance album.
Album on CD?
Yeah. What the album? Obviously, I'd heard Invisible Touch before that because you had it. So that would, but yeah, no. And then I got the Turn It On, the Greatest Hits '99. Got that as well. And then I got the Platinum Collection. That got me into a lot of the 70s stuff because I hadn't really heard a lot of it. But, yeah, really good band.
Yeah, for me, when it comes to fandom, am I a fan? Oh, yeah, I have seen them live, and I do follow them, and I do own a number of their albums, although predominantly the Phil Collins era. So actually, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is the first Peter Gabriel led Genesis album that I've ever listened to, so I know it's something that I'll need to rectify. And the first Genesis thing I ever bought was, I think, the first ever album I bought, which was Invisible Touch on cassette in 1987. So that album and the band, because of that, have a very special place in my heart. So yeah, Invisible Touch was the first thing I ever bought from the band.
I've got a Hold on Your Heart.
Hold on my heart. It's a tale of the tape. So The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is the sixth studio album by English progressive rock band Genesis. It was released as a double album on the 29th of November 1974 by Charisma Records, and is their last to feature original frontman Peter Gabriel. It peaked at number 10 on the UK album charts and number 41 on the Billboard 200 in the US, and it is currently their longest album to date. And well, based at the band is really finished now, it will be their longest album ever. So there's 23 tracks on the album, and I suppose I should read them out. Now I do have the vinyl edition of the album, but I think I'm going to cheat and just read them online. Okay, so the songs are The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, Fly in a Windshield, Broadway Melody of 1974, Cuckoo Cocoon, In the Cage, The Grand Parade of, is it Lifeless?
Nice easy titles, aren't they?
I know.
Not prog at all.
The Grand Parade of Lifeless Packaging. Yep, The Grand Parade of Lifeless Packaging. That one trips off the tongue. Back in NYC, Hairless Heart, Counting Out Time, Carpet Crawlers, The Chamber of 32 Doors, Lily White Lilith, The Waiting Room, Anyway, Here Comes the Supernatural Anesthetic, The Lamia, Silent Sorrow and Empty Boats, The Colony of the Slippermen, Ravine, The Light Lies Down on Broadway, Riding the Scree, In the Rapids, and It. And I think from all the albums we've done, that was probably the hardest lot to read out.
Yeah.
So we've got those 23 tracks. So the album is 94 minutes in duration, which means we need to lose at least 44 minutes today. There were two singles released from the album, and they are Counting Out Time, released in November 1974, and The Carpet Crawlers in April 1975.
The scent grows richer. He knows he must be near. He finds a long passageway lit by chandelier.
to try and keep everybody happy. You know, there would be parts of it where, you know, we'd be discussing lyrics and throwing some of the words around for different bits. And so the Lamia, which was so Tony's musical piece, or supernatural anesthetist, was Steve had brought in. So then, you know, they would discuss some of the lyrical stuff with me because they'd sort of got the writer's ticket. But, you know, I was pretty anal about hanging on to some lyrical flow through and, you know, being able to put a stamp on it. I really wanted a sort of tougher edge to this record than we'd had previously. And I didn't think there was anyone else in the band that was going to deliver that.
Struck by beauty, gripped in fright. 3 vermilion snakes of female face, the smallest motion filled with grace.
Hey, this is Marv from Pods Like Us, the show where we help you to find your next podcast addiction. And you're listening to Trimming the Musical Fat.
Paul, what was the critical reaction like to the album and its sales?
Members of the group expressed some concern about the album's critical reception it would get and expected to receive some negative reviews over its concept and extended format. Banks hoped the album would end people's comparisons of Genesis to Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, 2 other popular pop progressive rock bands of the time. Gabriel knew the album's concept was ideal for critics to get their teeth into. Since its release, the album has been met with critical acclaim. In 1978, Nick Kent wrote for the New Musical Express that it had a compelling appeal that often transcended the hoary weightiness of the mammoth concept that held the equally mammoth 4 sides of vinyl together. It went gold in both the UK and the US. The album sold 3.8 million copies, which was just under 1 million less than the predecessor, selling England by the pound. And the equivalent album sales was 62,500, but this was also down 16,000 on selling England by the pound. Out of the album, Carpet Crawlers was the most streamed song at 22,300.
Okay, it's time for us to put on our strange costume, which is covered in lumps with inflatable genitalia, as we trim the talk, the feature where we are all asked the same questions and have to answer them all in under 3 minutes. So we're just doing it today. Paul, are you ready? I'll let you answer first and I'll answer second. Okay, the time starts now. Describe Genesis in 3 words.
Prog good 80s.
I'm going to go prog rock royalty. Have you seen them live?
No.
I have. Your favourite Genesis album?
Invisible Touch.
Invisible Touch for me as well. Your favourite Genesis song?
Domino.
I'm going to say Firth or Fifth. Your favourite Genesis member?
Got to be Phil.
Yep, Phil Collins for me as well. And when did you first hear the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway album?
A couple of years ago when I got Apple Music.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, I only got round to listening to it at the beginning of this year. Your favourite track from that album?
Carpet Crawlers.
Mine's just Broadway Melody of 1974. Your least favourite song in it?
Probably just for the title alone, and it's about 8 minutes. Colony of Slippermen. Sounds like a Doctor Who episode.
Are you trying to say it's a bit pretentious?
Not at all, no.
I would go with the Waiting Room. And what would you rate this album out of 5 in its double album format?
2.5.
Ooh. I would say 3. And the thing with it, see if I was going to rate this purely based on the first disc, I ended up buying the double album on vinyl, and see if it was based just on that first record, it would be scoring a lot higher. Because I think the first record is great, and it goes off for me in the second. But we'll get to that. So we're currently saying 2.5 for you, 3 out of 5 for me. Okay, well done. We've done that in under 3 minutes.
Hello, listeners. This is David from In the Lap of the Pods Queen podcast, and you are listening to another episode of Trimming the Musical Fat. Slanjava.
Let's just talk a little bit then about your thoughts on the album. So you're saying you listened to it a couple of years ago for the first time on Apple Music. You've obviously revisited it recently for doing this episode. What's your kind of thoughts on the album as a whole?
It's of its time, I suppose. It's like a rock musical, or a concept album. So the hard part about doing this album as well is that it's all connected. So if you take one song, it kind of disconnects the rest of it. But it's good, but it's too long. It's just in songs about Slippermen. It just kind of turns me off. But like the instrumentation's great, and I just think there was like too much. It could have been condensed, but I think that was the era in the double albums, wasn't it? Around this time, everybody was doing double albums. So
yeah,
but it's a good album, but it could have been better.
Yeah, it's quite interesting you saying that. 'Cause, we've got another big 70s double album episode which comes out tomorrow, which is Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. We've already covered Pink Floyd's The Wall, ELO's Out of the Blue. So the 70s was just prime double album territory. And I think I've done The River by Bruce Springsteen, which was 1980, but a lot of that was recorded in the late 70s. So it was just that kind of time period. I'm in agreement with you. I think the reason why I've probably put off listening to this album for so long is because it always just seemed, oh my God, 94 minutes.
Yeah.
It always just seemed quite daunting. So by doing the episode, I was forced into listening to it, and I'm really glad I was, because you kind of have, when it comes to this album, there's kind of two different groups of people who like Genesis. There's one group, like my friend John Pollington, because I asked him about this album, and he went, "There's really nothing to trim in it. It is just their best album. It's wonderful. There's nothing that needs to be removed from it. It's just great." So you've got that group of people, and then you've got the others who go, there's lots of great stuff on there, but it's just too damn long. And so I kind of went into this going, right, okay, let's give it a fair go. And I was actually surprised at how much I liked it, which I know sounds a bit silly, because it was going to be that early 70s prog rock type thing, and I really wasn't expecting to like it. So it was great that I did, and especially that first half. I was going, I'm really like the earworm. Once you listen to it 2, 3, 4 times, it really, really started to appeal to me, and I think that part's great. But the second half, the second disc, that was where I would start to lose interest. I would start to be thinking about something else, and there was maybe repetition, or the songs just aren't as strong or not as interesting. There's still some good stuff on there, but by and large, it's very heavily weighted, the good stuff, to the first half of the album. And that seems to be a common consensus.
Mm-hmm. Apparently, they were going to do, rather than have a double album, they were going to make it into 2 albums and release them like 6 months apart. That's originally, and it was done at the last minute as well. Like, it wasn't like planned out or anything. It was done literally right up to the minute before it was pressed.
That's interesting. And the thing is, see, if you like the entire double album, fantastic and brilliant. Really pleased. And yeah, unfortunately, I've just fallen into that camp, which does think, first half great, second half less so. So anyway, we'll talk about the songs in more detail shortly. So seeing Genesis live, you never got the opportunity, but we obviously went to see Phil Collins as a solo artist in 93 or 4?
94.
On his Both Sides tour, and which I think was more memorable for the fact that the weather was hellish, and we were trying to travel through to Glasgow on a Friday night.
a December
Traffic
night
was
as well,
brutal.
wasn't it?
Yep,
Yeah,
and
it
we
was
missed the first 10
half.
minutes.
No, I think we missed quite a
Yeah,
lot.
we
Yeah.
did, yeah, which was really disappointing. But anyway, I was fortunate enough to see to see Genesis live in 1993 and 92.
92.
92, yeah. And so, bearing in mind at the time, Genesis are one of the world's biggest acts. They are a stadium band. They had just completed their Stadium 1 tour, and they were doing overdubs for the 2 live albums they were going to put out at Christmas. So they were doing a couple of small intimate shows to record them so they could use some of the stuff recorded for overdubs on the live album. That was The Way We Walk, volume.
There was the longs and the
Volume
shorts.
1, the longs and the shorts, yeah.
Yeah, one was like all the sort of the singles, and the other one was all the sort of medleys and stuff.
Yeah, and they're both really good.
Mhm.
And so anyway, they were playing the Edinburgh Playhouse, and the Edinburgh Playhouse, what the capacity is, 2,000, 3,000 if you're lucky.
3,500, I think.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So seated, old style theatre. So a band like Genesis playing a venue that small was a big, big deal. And my friend John, that's his favourite band. He loves Genesis. So he's like, right, well, we queue up overnight for tickets, which I had never done before. And I've never done again and never will again. It's horrible. But yeah, so we camped overnight, a Saturday night, and it poured down. I think we were about 8th in the queue, but there was loads of people queuing, sleeping bags and tarpaulin. And the best part though was seeing people come out of pubs and clubs, obviously really drunk, and who you queuing for, mate? And it'd be Genesis, and it'd be this. And I remember John going, "Oh, you know what? You're right. I've totally wasted my time here. I've seen the light, and I'm going straight home." And there'd just be so, but yeah. So anyway, I think the ticket office opened at 9 the following morning, Sunday morning. We got our tickets, and I had tickets that were in the stalls, in the second row, right in the middle from the stage. So brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So within spitting distance of Mr. Phil Collins, and it was a brilliant show. And they really just done the same stuff as they've been doing on that stadium tour. But yeah, it was brilliant to see a band that big in such a small venue. They were on top form, and Phil Collins looked into the whites of my eyes during Mama when he was doing his so yeah, brilliant. One of my favourite ever concerts, and I think just that whole experience, having to queue for tickets and everything was great. So good memories.
Were you aware of that at the time, or was it later on that you realised actually they were using those concerts for overdubs? Because I don't think we knew that at the time.
No,
that
wasn't known at the time.
Are they at the time?
Yeah, I think it was billed at the time as maybe just Genesis are doing a whistle stop small venue tour, just to finish off their We Can't Dance album touring schedule. That was the way it was billed.
Yeah, it's funny how like years later you find out things as well. Like we're talking about the Playhouse as a venue, and I didn't realise till recently that the Queen album A Day at the Races. I know we're going off topic a bit here, but A Day at the Races, when the gatefold, well, that's actually from the Playhouse. The bit inside.
Oh, is it really?
That's on stage at the Playhouse. Yeah.
I thought that was from was it Hyde Park they played?
Yeah.
I thought that was from the Hyde Park gig.
Yeah, the Playhouse.
There we go. Oh, well, back in the day, all the big acts played the Playhouse. Everybody came through and played there.
I had been contacted by William Friedkin, who'd just done The Exorcist, which was a hot film at that time, and really well-made film. And he had great ideas for sort of revolutionizing Hollywood and bringing in whole new teams of people who'd never worked in film before. And he wanted me in to work on ideas, story ideas and visual ideas. And for me, that was really quite exciting. I mean, still to this day, something that I enjoy doing. It was the time of the birth of my first child, and there was a really rough birth, and the hospital didn't think she was going to make it, and she spent first month in an incubator. Now, to me, there was no question of priorities, you know, living being and a record, and we were in the middle of making Lamb Lies Down, so I was spending a lot of time at the hospital, and I think they, well, Phil had a kid, but the others really weren't appreciative of, you know, all that family side of things, which they now are, and their lack of openness and of understanding, I think, of that situation for me was a deciding factor as well. They then sort of persuaded me to stay on and finish doing a tour, which would take us till middle of '75, and I guess it was somewhere around summer, autumn '74 when I decided to quit. And that was very hard. It was definitely the right thing for me to have done, and you know, clearly it was good for them because it sort of brought Phil out front and gave everyone a bit more space, I think. So, you know, I always look upon that time as a healthy part of growing up.
Okay, which songs are going to be getting a hold of our heart by claiming a spot on the supercut, and which are going to be getting thrown away? It's time to create the TTMS supercut of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. So for this 4 selection, we're including all 23 songs that featured on the original release of the album. But before we talk about the songs, let's talk about the album cover and its artwork, which was designed by Hypgenosis, which sounds like a planet in Star Wars. So what do you think of the album artwork, Paul?
I really like it. I think it's cool. It's quite iconic, actually. It's
How would you describe it? I mean, we're assuming everybody knows what the album artwork
is. Yeah, it's
like. How would you describe it for the listeners?
It's almost like it's like 3 photographs, like black and white, and the guy's looking at the 3 photographs. But he's almost, I believe he's the guy, the main character of what the album's about.
Which we think is pronounced Rael.
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 So that's, I just think it's really, I don't know, I just always, and it's the first album cover that has the Genesis font as well, that became known for the next few albums.
Yeah, it's like an art kind of Art Deco type font compared to the previous one they used to have.
Yeah, but no, I think it's a really good cover.
I
just think it's quite iconic. What about you?
It doesn't do much for me, I have to say. I kind of look at it and yeah, it just leaves me a bit cold, unfortunately. I think when I look at some of the other album covers from
they are good
over the years, just a bit, for me, they're just a bit more interesting, a bit more colourful, but that's just personal taste. So, but what they did obviously fits in very well with the theme of the album and its content. So on that side of things, it fits it really well. But
I don't know if part of the reason they've got the 3 photographs as well, because when they toured around that time, they had like a few screens behind them. So I don't know if that's maybe there's a relation to that. I don't know.
Maybe
be talking nonsense.
You could be. I don't know. Well, let's go into the songs anyway. So we do have to keep our supercut down to 50 minutes or less, and we have managed to do that. We've actually managed to get it at 50 minutes. So what we've done, Paul has picked his selections. So he created his own 50-minute playlist. I did the same. We then take a look at them together and see which songs are definitely getting on. So if both of us pick those songs, they get onto the supercut, and then there might be some songs that we've individually picked, and then we have to agree on which of them get on. And that's been actually quite easy today, Paul, because I was going through it, and You picked 12 songs, I picked 13, and 10 of the songs we agreed upon, which just
All right,
left
yeah.
maybe two more. We had space for two more. So what I've decided is that one of your selections was also John Pollington's favourite Genesis song. So I thought, right, let's put that one on, since you wanted it, and it's John's favourite Genesis song.
Right, okay.
And then there was kind of three that I wanted, and I just picked one of them. And there we go. We've got 12 songs, and it comes in at 50 minutes exactly.
Yeah,
So
and that's a good compromise as well.
yeah, so let's do that. But let's go through the 10 songs that we both agreed on first and just talk about them. Let's hear the first song that's getting on the album, and it is the title track. So here is The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. So, Paul, that was The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. We both picked it. I think it's an excellent song. What do you think of it?
Yeah, really good song. Good opener for the album. The first time I heard it was on the Turn It On Again, the compilation album in the late 90s. So that was the first time I'd heard it then. But it's just really quite catchy. It's quite a cool title. I love that title as well. It sounds so stupid, but it works. The Lamb Lies Down.
I first heard this. We were talking about me seeing them at the Edinburgh Playhouse. They did remember they did this kind of Peter Gabriel 70s type medley of songs, and The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway was one part of that. So that was the first time I heard it was part of the medley. And if we're tracking the story, the concept album story, this is where Rael is in New York City, and he is in Times Square. So that is where we start with the story. But yeah, this was released as a single in the US, but it did not chart. And the end of the song features a variation on the lyrics of the Drifters song on Broadway. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I like it. I think it's a great tune, very catchy, and it's got a really kind of lovely, scuzzy, aggressive bass sound on it, which is played by Mike Rutherford. So if you listen to it in the background with headphones, it's really, really good playing there. So yeah, it gets on. Unanimous choice. The next song that gets on is another unanimous one, and it is Fly on a Windshield. And here it is.
No one seems to care. They carry on as if nothing was there. The wind is blowing harder now, blowing dust into my eyes. The dust settles on my skin, making a crust I cannot move in. And I'm hovering like a fly, waiting for the windshield on the freeway.
So, Flying a Windshield, Paul, you picked it. Quite a short song, and a lot of these songs to begin with are quite short and segue into each other. So, what do you like about Flying a Windshield?
I almost think the next song as well, they're the same, really. They go into each other. I just think it's quite good how it's slow and builds up, and it almost makes me think a little bit of it sounds a bit like Kashmir, Led Zeppelin. There's a bit in it where it builds up. Obviously, Kashmir was that like 79 maybe or something, 70?
Yeah, late 70s, yeah.
So this was obviously before that. So I just like that build up, a bit like Kashmir, a bit Middle Eastern like sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement. I love how it builds, and then you get to, I think, just before 90 seconds, where the really strong guitar solo from Steve Hackett, and the kind of second half of the song, and a little bit of information there that after The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway tour, this song was only performed on a handful of occasions afterwards by the band. And if we're tracking the story of the album, so what happens is a black cloud appears over New York, and I think over Times Square, and it's approaching Raul, and he's getting kind of sucked into it, and you can't do anything about it. Like, and it's like a fly getting hit by a windshield. So that's where that part comes in. So that gets on. The third track gets on is my favorite song on the album, and it is the Broadway melody of 1974. And here's a bit of it for you.
Echoes of the Broadway Everglades, with our mythical Madonnas still walking in their shades. Lenny Bruce declares a truce and blazes all the hand. Marshall McLuhan, casual view, and head buried in the sand. Sirens on the rooftops wailing, but there's no ship sailing. Groucho with his movies trailing stands alone with his punchline failing.
So Broadway melody, 1974, Paul?
It's almost like a medley between this and the previous song, because it builds up, and this is like it built up, and it's only just over 2 minutes long, this song. So I kind of see it as like an extension to the previous song, but it's just good. It just maintains what the other song started off. But it's really upbeat, and I quite like that as well, because in a lot of these songs, they are quite long. So it's nice to have a good song that's upbeat and it's quite short as well.
For me, this is the highlight of the album. I love it. It's very, very dramatic. The keyboards on it, and it's brilliant the way it just kicks in. And what was quite interesting, though, I think initially I listened to this on Apple Music as well, and the actual timing of when the song kicks is correct on there.
It clips between,
yeah, it's correct. But there were different CD versions of this album over the years where it starts is in the wrong place. So that's quite interesting. But yeah, in Apple Music, the digital version, they get it right. And it's just brilliant, just really dramatic. And huge fan of this. Think it's brilliant. And so if we're tracking the story of Raul, so the black cloud is hit. He's been sucked in to this portal, really, which is to maybe another dimension. So that's where we are. So he's falling through this portal.
Apparently, Peter Gabriel had made these lyrics more Americana, because part of the criticism for previous albums was that they were too English. So Peter Gabriel wanted to get away from this with this album and this track.
Well, the next song that gets on, track 4, is one that I had 3 tracks to choose from, which you didn't pick, and they were Cuckoo Cocoon, the Chamber of 32 Doors, and what was the other one that I could have had? The Grand Parade of Lifeless Packaging. So the Chamber of 32 Doors was going to be too long, so that just left the Grand Parade of Lifeless Packaging and Cuckoo Cocoon. So I went with Cuckoo Cocoon.
Wrapped up in some powdered wool, I guess I'm losing touch. Don't tell me this is dying, 'cause I ain't changed that much. The only sound is water drops. I wonder where the hell I am. Some kind of jam. Cuckoo, cocoon, have I come to do something for you?
Again, it's a short one. It's quite a sweet little song as well. And actually, for me, it was kind of reminiscent of Radiohead, the kind of guitars on the verses. And it's got a beautiful, little melody, and it's obviously just continuing from the previous song as well, so it keeps it going. And unusually, you have a flute solo. So how often do you get that? So I thought we needed to get that on there. And again, if we're giving you some facts on it, this song was not performed again by the band after the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway tour. And country folk band Hazeldine recorded a cover version of it in 1998. And if we're following the story of Rael, this is where he regains consciousness after falling through to another dimension, and he wakes up to find himself wrapped in a cocoon. But it's nice and warm in there, so he's all right about it.
He falls asleep.
And goes
don't get
back
this
to
on Never Mind the Bollocks, do you? Stories like that.
You don't get that, yeah. So there we go. That's track 4, Cuckoo Cocoon, and we're back for the 5th track, one that we both picked, and a longer song, this one, but a really good song, and that is In the Cage. And let's play some In the Cage for you right now.
Rock face moves to press my skin. White liquid turns sour within. Turn fast, turn sour, turn sweat, turn sour. Must tell myself that I'm not here. I'm drowning in a liquid fear. Bottled in a strong compression. My distortion shows obsession. In the cage, get me out of this bed. If I keep self-control, I'll be safe. My soul in the childhood belief brings a moment's relief, but my cynic soon returns, and the light goes burns. My spirit just never learns.
Hey, that was In the Cage. So Paul, I think it's about 8 minutes long. We both picked it. We must like it. What do you like about it?
Just it's quite upbeat, quite heavy compared to maybe the last couple or the last song. It feels like sort of traditional Genesis from like before that. This was part of the medley on the 2007 tour. But yeah, no, I think it's good. Yeah, like I say, in some ways I don't like the Genesis songs that are too long, but I quite like a lot of the instrumentation in them. Actually, they're really quite melodic as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, this one really grew in me, and I like Gabriel's vocal on the chorus, where he does that kind of cage and does it much better than me, that kind of horse type thing. And I love the part, but my cynic soon returns and the lifeboat burns, where it kind of down tunes a bit with the keyboard, but it makes it very dramatic. And about 3 minutes 20 in, you get the most 70s keyboard solo of all time by Tony Banks. Which is great. So yeah, so a fact about this, the band performed this on their 2007 tour, as you said, and the stage screen showed a person running, trying to escape a cage which was in front of him. And if we're following the story of Rael, he wakes up and realizes he is trapped in a cave where stalactites and stalagmites grow very quickly, forming a cage.
This is Eric Paul Johnson from Face the Music, an Electric Light Orchestra song-by-song podcast. And you're listening to Trimming the Musical Fat. Oh dear. That wasn't my fat I trimmed.
Now we're going to do the top 5 selling Genesis albums. But number 5 was Duke with 4.9 million copies sold. At number 4 was Abacab with 6.4 million copies sold. At number 3 was the self-titled Genesis album with 8.8 million copies sold. At number 2 was Invisible Touch with 30 million copies sold. And the number 1 selling Genesis album is We Can't Dance with 13.8 million copies.
Very surprised at that.
Mm-hmm. And I thought it would be Invisible Touch.
Oh yeah, all day long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think because, well, it had bigger hits than that. Than, I mean, obviously there was hits on We Can't Dance, but really not on the same, I think, level of popularity or radio play, I would say. But oh well. But they're close. They're close.
Yeah, there's less than
those album figures.
800,000 in it. So they're not that far apart.
Yeah.
And if you look at all of them as well, excuse me, they're almost like in order, aren't they? Pretty much. You know, from 80 to 91. They're it's like each one increases on the sales.
I noticed the one with what's his name, Ray.
Well, calling all stations.
Yeah, guessing that was nowhere near the top 10.
I think it only sold 1 million or something. I'm saying only 1 million for Genesis. Yeah. To go from 13.8 million to 1 million in 6 years.
So, In the Cage gets on. So that is track number 5. So I had picked the Grand Parade of Lifeless packaging, but I was the only one, so that's not getting on, unfortunately. But I will maybe, I think it's more of a cheery tune, that one. And I like the kind of whistle on it. And again, if we're following the story with that one, so Rael leaves the cage and is spinning around, and he lands on a factory floor, and a sales girl shows him around the factory.
A dripping lady offering her dream dolls at less than extortionate prices.
Some might say this is quite surreal. So it didn't go on anyway, but the next one does, and that is Back in NYC. So yeah, what do you think about Back in NYC, Paul?
It's good. It's a good start to what was side 2 of the original vinyl on record 1. It's just a really good. It gets you back into this. I don't know, getting into the feel of it after kind of mixed tempo of the other songs on the album, because it's like a story, and this one's like a reintroduction into it, or it feels like that, you know, like back in New York City. I'm sure you'll give us some information about the backstory behind it.
Yeah, this is a really good song, really propulsive, and maybe a bit more atypical of Phil Collins era, 70s Genesis perhaps. And I think this song's actually really driven by Phil Collins's drumming, which is really impressive on it, and Tony Banks's keyboards. And I think the vocal on it from Peter Gabriel is really strong as well. And the interesting fact I found out about this is that when they played this song on the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway tour, that Peter Gabriel would throw a Molotov cocktail on the stage, creating an impressive explosion. And having not seen the video of that, I really can't figure out how they would be able to do that safely.
No.
And I don't know if you'd be able to get away with that now with health and safety.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's an interesting one. And if we're following the story, for this one, Rael flees the factory and runs into a reconstruction of his life in New York. Obviously. So yeah, that's back in NYC. That gets on. Another one is getting on is Hairless Heart, which is an instrumental. Hairless Heart, Paul.
Yeah, I just thought it was nice. I know it's an instrumental, but it's quite short. I just thought it was quite nice. I don't know, sometimes I know these prog-rock things are a bit pompous sometimes, but I don't know, I just thought it was quite nice. Just nice wee interlude.
Just a nice little palate cleanser, wasn't
it?
Yeah. It's kind of beautiful short instrumental, and there's not really much more you can say about it. And if we come back to the story, in this one, Rael pictures his fluffy heart being shaved by a razor blade.
His soul exposed.
So that was Hairless Heart. The next tune that's getting on is Counting Out Time, which we both picked. And here it is.
Counting out time, got the whole thing down by numbers, all those numbers give me guidance. Oh Lord, I need that now. The day of judgment's come, and you can bet that I've been resting for this testing, digesting every word the experts say. Erogenous zones, I love you. Without you, what would a poor boy do? Found a girl I wanted to date. Thought I'd better get it straight.
So Counting Out Time, I'll maybe start us off in this one. So for me, I was listening to this and I thought, this just sounds like something else. And I still can't really picture what that other something else is, but it's very reminiscent of an Abbey Road type Beatles song.
Like a Paul McCartney one.
Maybe,
like
yeah.
Medley, part of the medley, yeah.
Yep, the medley type stuff. That's what it reminded me of. It's just really tuneful pop. And it's got the weirdest sounding solo on it ever, which I thought was a keyboard solo, but I believe it's Steve Hackett's guitar solo. And it's just put through, it's just been heavily processed. Because I thought it was a keyboard, but I believe it's I get just a heavily processed guitar.
Zip, 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 zip. Put it away, Mr. Guitar.
So it just gives us that weird kind of squelchy type sound on it. And for the story of this, so in this one, Rael relives his first sexual experience. Yeah. So what does the song do for you, Paul?
It rocks my world. Was this not a single? Was this one of the singles?
It was, yeah. Which you can kind of understand, yeah. It is kind of more poppy.
It's quite a short compared to some of the other songs. I just like, well, first time I heard it would have been on the Platinum Edition album compilation, and just really like it. It's just really quite catchy, upbeat, quite poppy, quite commercial. I had no idea what the meaning of the song was, I have to be honest.
No.
The storyline and stuff. They're just really catchy and upbeat. So yeah, no, it's a good one of the highlights on the album.
Yeah, good tune.
Hey everyone out there in the podcasting world, this is Widescreen Podcast. This is Sam Wiles. You are listening to another episode of the Trimming the Musical Fat podcast.
And the next song for me is one of the highlights, and that is The Carpet Crawlers, which we both picked, and let's hear a bit of it.
Crawlers cover the floor in the red oak corridor. On my second side of people, they've more lifeblood than before. They're moving in time to a heavy wooden door where the needle's eye is winking, closing on the pore. The carpet crawlers heed their callers. We gotta get in to get out. We gotta get in to get out. We gotta get in to get out.
Yeah, Carpet Crawlers. Big fan of this one, Paul?
Yeah, it's a Genesis classic. First time I heard this was on the hits at the end of the 90s, and this one. So the first version I heard was the reunion version. They've got the original band members back. So there isn't a massive difference between that and the original. Because I know there was a lot of hype at the time saying, the original lineup have got back together. But it's just, it works well having Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel singing. But of course, we're talking about this version. It's just really, really catchy and everything that was good about Genesis in the 70s.
It's interesting because I know this is one of the band's most popular songs in the fan community, and I hadn't heard it before, or at least I don't think I'd heard it before. And I think initially, the first couple of times I was underwhelmed, but what I found is it did have the earworm effect. You found yourself later in the day kind of singing the chorus to yourself. It's a really good song. Yeah, it's grown on me. I think I love the shimmery keyboard that's on it, and obviously it's a very catchy chorus as well. And as you say, yeah, 1995, I think the band re-recorded it with Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel sharing.
99, I think it was.
I looked it up earlier on today. It had 95 on the records.
The new version was recorded in 99 for the Turn It On Again. The hits.
Oh, there we go. What the source I had was wrong. Well, okay. So it was the 90s anyway. And yeah, with this one, again, if we're following, this was a single as well. Releases the album's second single here. Yep. Okay, so that gets on. The Carpet Crawlers, the Chamber of 32 Doors, which I picked, does not. And that's an interesting thing if we're following the story. So with the Chamber of 32 Doors, so Rael has crossed the carpeted corridor, climbed the spiral staircase, and opened the door only to find himself in a large hemispheric chamber where there are 32 doors that are an equal distance apart from each other. Anyway, it doesn't get on.
And for our final rule tonight, it's time for another edition of one of our favorite departments here on Real Time, explaining jokes to idiots.
So, Paul, do you have any Genesis jokes to share with us today?
What is a nuclear physicist's favourite Genesis song?
I do not know.
Land of Cold Fusion.
I've got one here. So in 2009, Hyundai introduced a car called the Genesis. 5 years later, the front end left and was replaced by Phil Collins.
Yeah, so that, yeah.
You got any more?
There's more Phil Collins jokes than Genesis ones, to be honest. I haven't
Yeah.
read any more.
Oh, okay, I've got Phil Collins one for you. What do you call Phil Collins with dementia? A man of confusion. There we go. That's about as good as it gets. There's the jokes of the pod. Like trimming the musical fat? Why not check out our sister podcast, Trimming the Movie Fat, and our latest 2 episodes, which are dedicated to the Daniel Craig James Bond movies. So that brings us to one that does get on, which is Lily White Lilith. We both picked that one, and here it is.
The chamber was in confusion, all the voices shouting loud. I can only just hear a voice quite near say, please help me through the crowd. Said if I helped her through, she could help me too, but I could see that she was wholly blind. From a pale face and a pale skin, a moonlight shined, Lily White Lilith. She gonna take you through the tunnel of night. Lily White Lilith. She gonna lead you right.
This one, yeah, really good. I think, because it has, I was just thinking, it has Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins, because you hear Phil Collins quite loudly there in the vocals. And for me, it maybe as an indication of where Genesis will go next, because obviously Peter Gabriel leaves after this album, and this feels like what Phil Collins would go on to do in subsequent albums.
Yeah, it's a good band tune, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah,
really
the
good.
whole band's playing. Yeah, and it's kind of got a very 60s chorus on it. It's got a great rhythm section, and it's got the really good instrumental middle 8 before returning to the Broadway melody for the last couple of minutes. Yeah, it's a really good tune, this one. And if we're, again, returning to the story of Rael. So in this chamber
alive?
What's that?
Is he still alive?
He's still alive somehow.
Yeah.
In the chamber of 32 doors, Rael helps a blind woman who can, because she's blind, she's using her other senses, and she can actually sense where wind is coming from, because 31 of the 32 doors, when you go through them, take you back into the kind of dome. But only one door leads out of there. So she can kind of feel the draft where it's coming from. So, so Rael teams up with her, and they find the correct door to escape. And when they escape, they end up in a cave where Rael sits on a throne of stone and must face his fears. So you're still following this?
Just about.
Yeah, no. So there we go, Lily White Lilith.
Which composers would you say influenced your composition and influenced your writing, both with the band and classically?
Well, I think there's 2 composers I'd always name who influenced me in every area, which would be Rachmaninoff and Ravel. Rachmaninoff as much as anything for sort of piano style and his sort of a use of, dramatic but sometimes quite plaintive chords. And Ravel, in terms of more the kind of the chord structures and things, they use quite compound sort of chords and things. I don't know, it's just they just happen to be people I was taught piano when I was learning piano at school at a fairly basic level. There were 2 composers that I learnt pieces by, and they sort of stayed with me. I think I was very lucky that those were pieces I learnt.
And the top 5 selling Genesis singles are at number 5, Land of Confusion with 965,000 copies sold. Number 4, Follow You, Follow Me with 1.1 million copies sold. At number 3, Invisible Touch with 1.15 million copies. At number 2 is I Can't Dance with 1.35 million copies sold. And the number 1 selling Genesis single is Mama with 1.55 million copies sold worldwide.
Well, again, that's quite unexpected as well.
Yeah, I know.
I would have thought it would have been again one of the Invisible Touch singles.
Yeah, like In Too Deep or Tonight, or
the title track. I mean, that was a number one in the US. I think I Can't Dance had legs. Literally, that was very popular. The video got a lot of airplay. I remember there being lots of radio play of that song, and everyone really liked it. It was a cool song and cool video. So yeah, probably just.
You don't think as well? Maybe I suppose you could say they were at the commercial peak in '86, but maybe at this point they were the biggest band in the world, whereas probably in '86 they weren't. Like at that point, when we can't.
At that point, yeah, I mean, by that point they are bona fide superstars. The band, Phil Collins is a solo artist, Genesis is a band. By that point, they are a stadium band. They went into that album as a stadium band. So, I suppose, credit to them, they retained their audience from the previous album, which when you have a massive album, that doesn't always happen. And a good example would be, for example, Prince after Purple Rain around the world in a day didn't sell anywhere near as much as Purple Rain. Bruce Springsteen with Born in the USA, Tunnel of Love sold. I mean, obviously, these albums still sold a hell of a lot, but they never sold anywhere near the same scale as their kind of blockbuster album. So Genesis done well to retain. Well, actually sell just a wee bit more next time round.
Yep.
So yeah, fair play to them. Even though me personally, I don't believe We Can't Dance is one of their stronger works personally, but I think we'll get around to doing that album one day, won't we?
It's a prime candidate for this show because that's what.
Oh yeah,
that was that period, wasn't it, when the CDs came in and people could get like 80 minutes on a CD.
Yep.
So there's Invisible Touch. You're lucky if it's like 45 minutes.
Yeah,
that was what was good about the album.
Yep, We Can't Dance has definitely got the CD bloat of the early 90s. We can have up to 80 minutes, therefore we'll try and put on as much as possible, whether that's a good thing or not. The penultimate song that's getting on is Anyway, and let's hear a bit of it right now.
Your flesh to cool, enrich the soil. Not everybody's gold. Anyway, they say she comes on a pale horse, but I'm sure I hear a train. Oh boy, I don't even feel no pain. I guess I must be driving myself insane. Damn it all, does us plug a hole in heaven, or heaven plug a hole in us? How wonderful to be so profound.
So anyway, Paul.
Yeah, I like that one. That I like the piano in it. It was just good having that.
Do you remember the Jamiroquai song, King for a Day?
No, I don't know. Is that what you think it sounds like?
Oh yeah, the piano, that kind of rolling piano is very, very
Yeah.
similar, yeah. I think King for a Day came out, 1999, 2000, something like that. It was very, very similar, yeah.
There's no way I'm coming back to you.
Well, about 1 minute 40 into the song, it goes very Phantom of the Opera with a dun 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 kind of dramatic
Musical,
breakdown there, and the song also has a great guitar solo too. And, well, you're asking the question, what's happening with Rael here? Well, at this point, he's trapped in a collapsed cave and is calmly awaiting death. There you go.
Had a good day, hasn't he?
He's having a great day, yeah. Well-travelled man. So the last song that gets on is the Lamica. Oh, sorry, the Lamica, the Lamia even. So this was picked by you, wasn't picked by me and our friend John. This is his favourite Genesis song. So it's his favourite ever Genesis song, yeah. So this gets on, and yeah, let's hear a little bit of it.
The scent grows richer. He knows he must be near. He finds a long passageway lit by chandelier. Each step he takes, the perfumes change from familiar fragrance to flavors strange. A magnificent chamber meets his eye. Inside, a long rose water pool is shrouded by fine mist. Stepping in the moist silence, with a warm breeze he's gently kissed.
Do you know what it sounds like? Oh, do you know what it's, or I suppose this came up, Ripples. Do you know the song Ripples?
By
Genesis.
All right.
I think it comes on the next album or the one after it. And it sounds like that. It sounds so, but it's nice. It's like almost like a power ballad that was done like 6 years before power ballads were known as power ballads. But yeah, no, it's a good song. I can see why John would rate it highly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good song. There's other songs that I preferred, which is why I didn't pick it. The song live, so the song's power was enhanced by the first of two magnificent costumes. A tube of fabric turning around a Peter Gabriel cot with the Lamia's dance. Well, I did say that I was going to read out John's. He did give us some comments, and I thought they would be worth reading out. So let me just find them for you now. Not to be a pain, but there's not very much musical fat on the lamb that could be trimmed away. It's a perfect sequence from start to finish. It's been accused of being bitty, but I never felt that way about it. It has always struck me as their most challenging but most rewarding piece. I always get a powerful emotional flashback listening to that sweet little track, Hairless Heart. It's such a pity it's so short. My absolute favourite song by the band is on the album too, The Lamia. That tune is achingly beautiful, and the lyric, the bitter harvest of a dying bloom, gets my vote for the bittersweet best they ever got me with.
And the thing is as well, if you take it into context, imagine we were around when that album came out and you had the vinyl, you've got the cover and you've got all that. You might well see it the same way, but of course we're coming to it in a different context where it's a streaming service, it's not the vinyl, it's not maybe connected as much because you could just choose which track. Whereas maybe back then it was that was the journey, it was that story, that concept.
Another thing you've got to bear in mind, we're listening to this 50 years after, or nearly 50 years after it came out. That's a long time.
Yeah.
You know, it's the equivalent of somebody in 2005 listening to Elvis's first records. Okay, let's reveal the supercut of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. So we have The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, Fly in a Windshield, Broadway Melody of 1974, Cuckoo Cocoon, In the Cage, Back in NYC, Hairless Heart, Counting at Time, Carpet Crawlers, Lily White Lilith, Anyway, The Lamia. I think that was a lot, wasn't it? Yep, so that's 12 tunes. Let me just check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep, there's our 12 tunes, and it comes in at 50 minutes exactly, which is fantastic. So what would you rate this version of the album out of 5, Paul? So you said 2.5 previously for the double album.
Up to 3.
Really? I'm surprised at that. Why would you say just a 3? What's not maybe not doing it for you that's taking it to a 4?
I guess I don't know that there's a lot of songs to get to know. So yeah, that's probably why. So a lot of the songs, but it's an improvement on, I would say a 3, but in another context it would probably be more, but just at the moment it would be a 3.
Yeah, I will say I gave this a really good listen. And initially, I think with my first couple of listens, I wasn't impressed. And I think a lot of that is, I think initially a lot of the tracks they seem very samey.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only with repeated listening that you then started to pull bits out of it, and you can see some of the individualism within them there and how things flowed, which really added to me. So going from thinking, I don't know if this is all that great, I did change my opinion. And yeah, I said for the full double album, I'd have it a 3. I think for this version, it would go up to maybe even a 4.5 for me. I think it's really, really, really strong. I'm very happy to listen to this now and really, really enjoy it. It's actually a good one. I dropped Alison and Ben off at the airport last week, and on the way back, and it was only 5 in the morning, I was able to head along the bypass and crank it up, and it was just really good to listen to in the car, really loud.
Say the album's that long, I could have
driven them to
Australia, probably.
and back again. I know, you're probably right. So, Paul, do you prefer the answer's obvious. Do you prefer the original album or the supercut?
The supercut, and it should have been released as a single album.
Yep, I am in total agreement with you there. Okay, if you want to listen to the TTMF supercut of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, you can do so on Spotify. If you join our Facebook group, we will share the link there. And I think we'll pop it in the show notes as well, so you can give this a listen and see what you think. It's time for the final questions. So, Paul, to preserve the band's mystique and legend, when would it have been the best time for Genesis to have broken up?
For all the people that love the 70s, Peter Gabriel would probably say after this album. I think they've kind of been on and off, but I would say they've done it at the right time, actually. The Invisible, or mind you, the the Phil Collins lineup, like when they split up. Because it's hard, do you mean which lineup,
I suppose maybe as a recording unit.
Yeah, I think they did they should have split up. Like, they shouldn't have got back together, and they shouldn't have got that Ray Wilson, and I think they should have just left it when Phil Collins left initially. Because apparently that documentary Archive, it was 2014, they got back together and there was talk of them doing some music, but it never worked out. They were going to, like the original lineup, Peter Gabriel and Steve Hackett as well.
Right.
But so I would say the way it was actually 92 after the We Can't Dance tour.
I'm with you. I totally agree. I think they kind of built, their fan base over time, and obviously, yes, they became more commercial as time went by. But yeah, they finished off with their best-selling album, the biggest tour. They were still having hit singles, and were still relevant. So they kind of timed it absolutely perfectly to have left it at that stage. And yeah, it was a big mistake to have carried on without Phil Collins.
Yeah,
doing that. What's it called? Congo?
Calling All Stations.
Calling All Stations. Congo is on it though. Yeah.
What I always find a lot of artists black out some of their history. Like in that documentary, basically makes out it's like 92 and it suddenly jumps to 2007 when they had that, but actually had that time in 96, 95, 96 with that Ray Wilson. Doesn't get mentioned, and I just think, yeah, you might not like it, but that is part of the history, is the good and bad. It's like David Bowie, Tin Machine. Tin Machine never gets mentioned. I actually think it was good, Tin Machine, but you won't find that in a documentary or anything. But it's still part of the history, you can't erase it.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so we're in agreement about when the band should have called it a day. So, question for you, because I know the answer to this. So, Ultimate Classic Rock ranked all 15 Genesis albums in 2017. What do you reckon was the album that was ranked number 1, and which album was ranked lowest? So, this is studio albums.
When we start, the lowest one would probably be their first one. Oh, sorry, no, Calling All Stations.
And you would be actually just revisiting this to remind myself. You are right. Yes.
It's either the first one or the last one.
About it. Let me tell you what they say about it. So, Calling All Stations in 1997, the band's final offering is not a Genesis album so much as a sound of desperation on the part of guitarist Mike Rutherford and keyboardist Tony Banks. The last men left standing roped in new singer Ray Wilson when Phil Collins' departure forced an attempt on the pair's part to justify their continued existence as a creative unit. Unfortunately, that justification was doomed from the start by indistinct songwriting, washed out production, and general malaise. There we go. What do you think was number 1?
This album.
You think The Lamb?
Yeah.
That was number 2. It was another 70s one though.
The previous album, Selling England by the Pound.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Selling England by the Pound was ranked number 1. Said the albums that occupy the top 3 spots on our list of Genesis albums ranked worst to best are all exceptional and represent not only the pinnacle of prog rock, but a high point for 70s rock in general. On one hand, Selling England by the Pound's quirky, hooky I Know What You Like in Your Wardrobe was the closest Genesis came to a radio song at that point. On the other, The Cinema Show and The Battle of Epping Forest are prime examples of the broad range of possibilities prog's ascendance brought. Yeah, so they had Selling England by the Pound from 1973 at number 1, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway from 74 at number 2, and at number 3 they had Foxtrot from 1972. So there you go.
Because they didn't really, they were almost like an album band really up until I think Follow You, Follow Me. That was like their first single, like major hit, wasn't it? Really, although they'd had like single releases, I think that was their first major hit.
Yeah. Yep. Look out for our next pod coming out on the 14th of July, and it's the second episode in our special Bruce Springsteen side series covering his studio output from 1975 to 1987. This time around, we are critiquing the Boss's 1978 album, Darkness on the Edge of Town. Well, as Genesis once famously said, that's all. So thanks to you for listening, and Paul, yep, we're going to publicly say it. We're definitely going to do at some point the We Can't Dance album. We'll definitely get around to that. In fact, we'll try and get that done before the end of the year. I'm quite keen to re-listen to that since I haven't done so in 30 years.
It's a good album.
So we'll maybe try and get that scheduled before the year's out. But anyway, thanks to you for listening, and until next time, keep trimming.
That podcast is a Stephen and Paul Nicholson production. Contact us via voicemail by going to anchor.fm/TTMF/message, or tweet us at musical trimming, or email us at trimmingthemusicfat@gmail.com. Keep up to date on the show by joining our Facebook group or visiting our website www.trimmingthemusicalfat.com.
I love it. I love it.